Hi cocktail lovers, Phillip Jones, Martini Whisperer here. Thanks for tuning in. In this episode of Sipping Time, I want to talk about the ratios of vermouth to gin or vodka in your martini and how that evolved a little bit over time. Once upon a time, way back when, early 1900s, late 1880s, even maybe around that time, the ratios of your vermouth, which is dry vermouth, as opposed to the red stuff, which is your sweet vermouth, the dry vermouth, was quite different to what we might experience today in a so-called dry martini. There is a school of thought that actually says that the Italian brand Martini had something to do with the name of the cocktail. Subject for another time, we'll come back to that. But anyway, so way back when, there was even ratios of even 50-50. 50-50 dry vermouth to gin or vodka, as the case may be. And as time has gone on, a couple of things have happened. Now, the fashions have changed, and to my mind, I think what's actually happened is the quality of booze has got better. So the quality of your vodka or your gin and its complexity and its finesse have really evolved, especially in the last 20, 30, 40 years. Which means that you don't need to disguise the flavour, dare I say it, behind some vermouth. There were things during World War II, of course, where the French and Italian vermouths simply weren't available. And there's this myths, or anecdotes rather, of Winston Churchill during World War II would simply just look through the bottle on his way to the gin bottle, and that's as close as he got to dry vermouth. Probably wasn't available because it came from Vichy, France. Anyways, but for those who have grown up, knowing there's a dry martini, it's nice to know that there are other versions of it. So it goes basically simply like this. And there's two rules of thumb I use. One is the vermouth that you've got, and what spirit you're working with. I guess the third one is simply what mood you're in and where you want to go. Now, for those, if you don't like a really puckery, spirity kind of thing, then you may want to add more vermouth to it as well. So let's start the basics. Let's start at vermouth. And I've got 4 different types here, all very different. We'll start with an Australian vermouth called Maiden Eye. It comes out of Melbourne, and it's very aromatic. And if you've not tried this before, it can be an acquired taste because it's got lots of very interesting Australian botanicals in it. But it's gorgeous and fragrant and aromatic, like I said. Strawberry gum and wattle seed, river mint. It's really quite a gorgeous product. They make a beautiful range of vermouths. However, it's very intense in flavour. So you got to remember what vermouth is. It's wine, touch of spirit to help preserve it, and herbs, and aged in barrels, more often than not. And as such, it's a living thing. So if you do, once you open your vermouth, please keep it in the fridge if you can, or get a vacuum seal, because this won't sit around like a bottle of gin and vodka forever. This will deteriorate and go stale over time. So buy yourself some time and do that. Anyway, Maiden Eye is gorgeous stuff, but it's quite intense in flavour if you're not used to it. So I tend to halve the ratio when I'm working with this. It lends itself very nicely to a London dry gin, like a Tanqueray or Plymouth, to get some really extra complexity, but you use a lot less because you don't need to. I'm not a big fan of these people who will, put some vermouth in a mixing shaker, stir it around and pour it out. It's just a waste of good vermouth. Just use less. You've all seen Cinzano or Martini. Again, you've got to make sure you get the dry variety. This is the extra dry version, and even it's a personal taste, and this is very, very common in bars. I find this, again, quite fruit-driven, quite wine-driven, so I tend to use a little bit less of this because I want the spirit to be dominant. It's a PhD yet to be written about the alchemy between dry vermouth and the spirit gin or vodka to make a martini, but clearly you cannot have one without the other. But there's a subtle play, and for my mind, the vermouth is your backbone and the deeper complexity and a very elevated kind of, and the aromatics that come into play as well. Very, very subtle, but it's the bridesmaid, not the bride, shall we say. So Cinzano, the Italian vermouth, I tend to use, again, a little bit less because I don't want it too fruit-driven. Or wine-driven. Then 2 French vermouths, and there's many, many others available. There's Balthazar, which is also fantastic. Noliprat, some from France, towards the south of France. Beautiful stuff. I find it quite versatile. So this is one of my 2 go-to house vermouths, so to speak. Again, I keep this in the fridge to extend its life. It's a bit more spicier and richer than some of the others, but still quite dry. So you can dress it up and dress it down, so to speak, or change the ratios quite comfortably. And the other one, some Fort Savoy, family-run business, Dolan. is a lighter version, if you like. It's not so intense, but it's handle handling. A bit like the Maiden Eye, it can take over if you don't use it. Again, it's an acquired taste, but a very, very elegant dry vermouth as well. So you've got your vermouth, then you've got your spirit. And again, you're not trying to compete here. You're looking for something that's going to complement. So if you've got a very full flavoured spirit you're working with, then you may want to use something a bit more richer like the Noddy Pratt. If you've got a light, more delicate gin, say like a Plymouth gin out of England, then I will tend to steer towards Dolon so it doesn't get dominate. So that's a little choice. So you think about the intensities of flavour and how they might combine. The third one, sort of ties up, then you've got the combination of spirit, what we're dealing with. And the third thing, of course, is the ratios. So I said way back when, it was almost like 50-50. So half a bottle, you know, so half whatever you're pouring is your vermouth and the rest being your booze, your gin or your vodka. You can start there, and that's not a bad drink. It's gonna have to look darker. It's not really clear because it's getting the colour from the vermouth, of course, which is great. A lot more rich intensity and flavour. So that's a nice, more sipping kind of style of martini, and more richer in flavour and more complex, which comes from the vermouth. Then you just simply dial it all the way back across the spectrum to, if you had, for example, say 60 mils of gin in your martini, if it was a perfect martini, then it's going to be 30 mils of vermouth and 30 mils to gin or vodka. Then you might go to a so-called wet martini. If it's a dry martini, it has to be a wet martini, right? So then you might have something like maybe 15 mils of dry vermouth to, do my math, right? 45 mils of vodka or gin. And again, it's not going to be so austere, so puckery, so boozy. Softer, rounder on the palate, more complexity. So if you like lots of flavour, then that could be a really good place to start. Then you've got the classic kind of dry martini, and for say 60 mils of gin or vodka, you're going to be looking at around 10 mils or so of, for me, of vermouth. Then we get into the kind of cult territory of like the super dry or very dry martini. Again, like I said, I'm not a fan of adding vermouth over ice, stirring it around or shaking and pouring it off, then adding your gin or vodka. I think that's just wasteful. So you end up towards say 5 mils. And it doesn't sound like a lot, 5 mils is about plus 60 or whatever you're doing. Very small ratio, like a 1 to 10, 1 to 12 ratio. That still has a difference and still has an impact. Bear in mind, the final element of martini, of course, is going to be your garnish, your lemon or your Gibson or whatever. So that's something to think about. And what we haven't touched on, we'll do another time, is about dirty martinis. And I'll say this in brief before we do another clip about that sometime, is that if a dirty martini is, you can really dial up your vermouth because you look with lots of savoury spice richness in that. So there you are. Quick history about the ratios over time. So think about next time you have your martini, maybe add a bit more vermouth, see how you like it. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and look out for new clips every week. Bye.